so much. We're going to go ahead and get started. Excuse me.
No, I feel better.
All right, I'm going to try to project. Can you all hear me over there? All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Gubernatorial Forum. I'm Terry Freeman. I'm Executive Director of the Reginald F. Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. I don't say that 3 times fast because it's a lot. So I just call us the Lewis Museum, and I thank you all for being here. We really are so happy that you have chosen to join us this evening. We welcome you into this place and this space where Black history and culture is not a sideshow, it's the main event. And we will always make sure that it is the main event. The museum opened in 2005 to be the authentic voice for Black history and culture. Today, we document, interpret, preserve the complex experiences and contributions of Black people, and we serve as a catalyst for sustained change, provide robust programs and exhibitions, and bold conversations that educate and challenge. We are unapologetically Black with our perspective, and we are unapologetically human as we welcome everyone into this space. So tonight, we are really pleased to partner with a number of good organizations that are doing good work in the community. They are Baltimore Votes, Black Girls Vote, Greater Baltimore Urban League, the League of Women Voters, Maryland, NAACP, Baltimore City, and Out for Justice. Please give them a hand. Now, I'm going to tell you how the candidates were selected, and then I will introduce someone from the League of Women Voters who will tell you what the process is going to be and how this is going to flow this evening. We adhere to the policy of our vetting partner, the League of Women Voters, Maryland. To be invited to participate in a League of Women Voters Maryland debate for the general election, a candidate must be legally qualified, if elected, to hold the office under federal and state law and comply with applicable state and federal laws regarding disclosure of campaign finances, and have filed and met all requirements to be on the ballot according to Maryland's election laws, and have demonstrated significant voter interest and support by being nominated by a recognized political party in Maryland, or being one of the top 3 candidates with at least 5% public support in a recognized nonpartisan statewide public opinion poll, or if the difference between the 3rd and 4th place candidates is less than the margin of error, all 4 candidates. Or if no such poll exists, the candidates must provide examples of campaign coverage by at least 2 major media sources in different geographical areas of the state, and demonstrate that a formal campaign is being conducted by the existence of campaign headquarters and staff, or an active, updated at least weekly social media presence, and reporting to the State Board of Elections or Federal Election Commission campaign. Contributions from at least 100 donors. So this is the real deal, folks, okay? They had to qualify under that. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Gail Sunderman, who is with the League of Women Voters, Maryland.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to see so many people out here tonight. I'm Gail Sunderman from the League of Women Voters of Maryland. Before I get to the rules and format, I just want to say a little bit about the League. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages an informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major political public policy issues and influences policy through education and advocacy. The League's mission is to empower voters and protect democracy. To learn more about the upcoming election, I urge you to go to vote411.org. If you simply put in your address, it will bring up the information on all the races, candidates, and ballot questions that you will be voting on. There is also downstairs, we have voter guides, printed voter guides for Baltimore City. One last thing, I urge you to join a local league in your community. It's a great way to get involved with the issues in your area. Okay, so on to the rules and the format. This is a forum, not a debate. Each candidate will take the stage individually and be asked a series of 5 questions on issues in economic development, healthcare.
Step closer to the mic.
I know, my voice doesn't project. Thank you. Is that better? Okay. So each candidate will take the stage individually and will be asked a series of 5 questions on issues in economic development, healthcare, education, justice reform, and voter rights and civic engagements. Representatives from the forum sponsors will be asking the questions. The order of the candidates that will be on stage was predetermined through a community poll. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to questions. If requested, candidates can ask that the questions be restated, and representatives from the partner organizations may ask follow-up questions. In that case, candidates will have 30 seconds to respond. Finally, candidates will have 1 minute for closing statements. Our timekeeper is Tanea Moore. She's right here in the front row. She's from the League of Women Voters, Baltimore City. She will hold up a yellow card when 15 seconds remain and a red card when the time has expired. When the stop card is shown, candidates must finish, may finish their sentence, but they must stop speaking within 10 seconds. Time limits will be strictly observed. Finally, we are asking the candidates to be respectful of their opponents and refrain from personal attacks or charges. In other words, stick to the issues. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the forum.
Ready? Okay. Our first candidate is coming up, Wes Moore, and our partners are Joshua Harris from the Baltimore City branch of the NAACP Sam Novy from Baltimore Votes, Natasha Murphy, Black Girls Vote, Tiffany Majors, Greater Baltimore Urban League, and Nicole Hanson Mundell, Out for Justice.
It's good to see you.
I'm sure you're familiar with the work of justice and around very
Oh, okay. I was going to go straight to questions. Yeah, we took out a very brief opening statement, and just to say, first to say good evening, everybody. It is good to see everybody. It is good to be back in a place that has nourished all of our souls for a very long time. And I am so unbelievably grateful for the treasure and the celebration of Black excellence that is the Reginald F Museum. I am so grateful for the leadership, Terry, bless you. And thank you for everything you do and for your entire team. I always love coming and being greeted by Miss Joy as soon as I walk in. But also, it's good to be here in a time and in a place where we're also talking about the issues that are relevant to my hometown, which is Baltimore. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a Baltimorean. I'm proud of the fact that while I'm not a Baltimorean by birth, I'm a Baltimorean by choice. I'm a Baltimorean. I'm someone who even though being born down in Tacoma Park, I moved around a lot when I was young. Not because of choice, but because of tragedy. Because I watched my father die in front of me when I was almost 4 years old because he didn't get the health care that he needed. And then my mother moved us up to go live with my grandparents up in the Bronx. My grandfather was a minister. My grandmother was a school teacher. And as I always say, their house was barely big enough for them, but they figured out a way to make it big enough for all of us. And when I was 14 years old, my mother got her first job that gave her benefits. First job that allowed her to work one job instead of multiple jobs. That job was at the NAACP Foundation. And that job didn't just change her life, it changed the trajectory of our entire family. And I knew from a young age I was going to devote the rest of my life to public service because I was going to fight for people like my mom. And I was going to fight for people like my dad, who deserve better. And so in this time, I'm very clear that what we are watching and we're seeing in the city of Baltimore, we've watched an intentional neglect that has led to generational impacts. And in the time that you have had a generational pullback, the only way that you can address that is a generational build-up. And that's why I'm running for governor. Because it's time that that's the type of impact and that's the type of urgency that we take these challenges and these problems with. So bless you and I'm excited for this evening. Thank you.
So given how
Yes.
and the law,
It's like a feedback.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
Yeah, because it's hard to hear the question.
Try a different mic.
People can't hear. They might have, they might have hearing. Try that.
Yeah.
Turn. No, turn it on.
Push the button. It'll turn red. Yes, that's better. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You all right.
So, as I stated, the work that we do at Outcome Justice is around criminal justice reform, policy reform, and supporting the prisoners from our prisons and jails. And oftentimes, we are filling the gaps but agencies just don't have what we do. As you know, in town, DC, there's a specific office that is needed to this specific population. If you were elected governor, what would be your vision, or what would it look like for your administration administration to have such established a dedicated office that tends to the needs of incarcerated individuals, and how does it will be controlled as an agency for us. They would do that labor, healthcare, coffee. So what would it look like your office if you were to establish an office that we're seeing on?
Amen. Amen. First, thank you for the question, and sincerely, thank you for your leadership. I have to just say very quickly, to be here and to be in conversation with 5 people who aren't just personally, but organizationally, people who I respect deeply, it means a lot. So thank you for that. Thank you for the question. And you're absolutely right. I ran one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in this country, where we work with over 1,600 organizations. And one of the things that I know is that for every single one of the organizations that we worked on, and we worked on issues everything from housing insecurity, food insecurity, education, early childhood, criminal justice reform. One of the biggest things I knew about all the organizations that we supported was the reason that all of them existed was because there was a breakdown somewhere. And every one of the organizations we were working with, that essentially what was happening is if we're not fixing the systems that exist, that we will find ourselves cleaning up the debris that comes from broken systems. And so this is where government does come in. And so when I think about what's going to happen when it comes to criminal justice reform, the way we're going to look at these items from the Moore Miller administration, it really comes to this, is that how can we do 2 things at once? One, how are we making sure that we're stopping the stream of people that are entering into the system? We know that any interaction with the criminal justice system, now I'm not talking just conviction, any interaction whatsoever can result in up to $1 million of loss when it comes to lifetime earnings. And so we have to stop the hyper-incarceration that we have of people, the hyper-militarization and thinking that we can arrest our way out of every problem. And specifically when it comes to our communities, we also need to deal with the issue of reentry, because right now what we're doing is we're making every sentence a life sentence. Because we have multiple barriers that exist for people when they come back home, where you can live, where you can work, if you can go to school, if you can get money for it. I mean, so we have to be very clear that we have to do both of those 2 things at the same time to address the issue of incarceration, recidivism, and creating better pathways for people when they come back home.
So is it safe to say that the Moore administration, if elected, will work to collaborate with community organizations and strengthen the current agencies and envision an office that specifically engages in the
100%, and it's all I've ever known. It's all I've ever known. And frankly, it's the only way that the work is ever going to happen, because I do believe in this idea that, the people who are closest to the challenge are the ones who are closest to the solutions. They're just hardly ever at the table. And so you're going to see core collaboration existing between the Moore Miller administration and our community organizations that are on the ground actually doing the work. And that will include everything from job retraining, job reskilling, placements for people as they enter back into, but then also there's things like record expungement. It also is things like making sure we have proper placements and proper pathways for people and reducing the barriers when they return back home. And so it's a collaborative effort that we will be doing.
Hi, Tiffany Major, Greater Baltimore Urban League. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this imperative discussion. The COVID-19 pandemic has challenged Maryland residents physically, emotionally, and financially. And I want to include specifically where great disparities in the Black communities. As governor, one of you will be our state financial steward. We know that the pandemic has increased the state's officers. As governor, how will you ensure that those funds are efficiently used to ensure Maryland remains financially solvent, while also protecting our most vulnerable communities and appropriately distributing resources? Please be very specific, and please include how you will support small grassroots nonprofit organizations as well.
Yes, thanks so much. And it is true. I mean, what happened with COVID-19 was not just an exacerbation of these disparities. It was an exposure of the disparities that already existed. It's the fact that for so many communities, and particularly for our communities, we have been hit hardest by this in all frames and all forms. Everything from mortality rates to a lack of assistance when it comes to being able to get grants and supports. You know, if you consider the fact that, that even if you look at state grants that went out towards small businesses, capital that was allocated from the federal government that was supposed to go towards small businesses to support them during the times of COVID, look at the disparities that existed, right? So take a look, for example, you look at the difference between Baltimore City and Baltimore County, where Baltimore County, of all the grants that were distributed, is about $230 million that was supposed to be allocated for grants. For Baltimore County, the number came in at around 14%. For Baltimore City, the number came in at around 6%. That's the disparity. For Prince George's County and Montgomery County, the difference was 19 and 9. And Prince George's County and Montgomery County, by the way, had the same number of qualifying businesses. 19 versus 9. So there needs to be an intentionality about the fact that we do have a situation where even though we have a strong fiscal foundation for the state, you have billions of dollars that are coming in from the federal government, from ARPA, money that's coming in for small business support. We have to be deliberate and intentional that the capital that is there is going to the communities that have been hit the hardest. And that includes both for things like services and supports, but it also includes supports for our small businesses, our micro businesses, our NDEs and our WBEs, and also fixing broken procurement laws that existed well before anyone knew what the word COVID was.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So the most recent annual report from Maryland State Government did indicate a persistent pay disparity in the gap between men and women employees, those employed by the state of Maryland. And so what action steps will your administration take to improve equity and address this pay disparity within the state government?
Thank you so much. And I tell you, this issue, it's not just political. This issue is personal. Where, you know, again, my mother didn't get her first job that gave her benefits until I was 14 years old. She didn't get her first job that allowed her to work one job instead of multiple jobs until I was 14. And by the way, this is a woman who went on to earn a master's degree. So when we're having conversations about inequitable pay between men and women, and inequitable pay between people of color and non, this is not an academic exercise to me. I don't need a white paper to explain it. I've seen this. And seeing that reality was part of my motivation for getting into public service in the first place. And so when we talk about how those disparities exist, there's a few things that we know about when you start watching an exacerbation of the disparities, and also when you're watching a cash allocation, how we allow for the government to give away free waivers for that process to exist. We see how that disparity starts to exist primarily when when families start having children. And a great example of what we look at and why women start falling behind when it comes to pay scale is you look at examples like why we have a broken childcare system here in the state of Maryland. Since COVID-19, we've watched over 750 childcare centers close. Wow. That is keeping people back from re-entering back into the workforce, primarily women, and it's also underscoring the fact that most of the childcare providers are female entrepreneurs, but they are never treated as such. So that means fixing the broken childcare system so we can get women back into the workforce. It also means things like fixing broken procurement laws. If you look at what we have for MBEs and WBEs, for example, the MBE criteria right now in the state of Maryland is 29% goals. Do you know what the state of Maryland has never come close to hitting? 29%. Because we continue to allow free waivers to take place and allow people to get business by making quote unquote good faith efforts to find women and minority businesses to partner with. Those days need to end, and the days of a female business and a WBE having a better opportunity and a better chance of getting a federal contract than a state contract makes no sense, and in our administration, we are going to address that and fix that.
Thanks so much for being here tonight. I want to ask a question that comes up a lot in our work registering voters in high schools across Baltimore City. 5 Maryland cities, including 4 in Prince George's County, have already lowered the voting age to 16 for city elections. Brandon Scott, when he ran for mayor, endorsed adopting this policy in Baltimore City. In the cities that have lowered the voting age, 16 and 17-year-olds turn out at higher rates than older voters, and 16-year-olds already serve as election workers all across the state of Maryland, often bringing critical language and technological skills to the polling place. Tonight, I want to share that Baltimore Votes is going to be launching a student poll worker program with our local election administrators to engage young people directly in our democracy and address some of the poll worker shortages that have plagued Baltimore City in recent years. I'll also note that in 2019, 4 Maryland members of Congress, including the late Congressman Cummings, all voted in support of lowering the voting age to 16 nationwide. Do you support lowering the voting age to 16?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, Chief Sammy. And you're right, it's not something that the governor can do unilaterally. It's going to take an adjustment from the Constitution, but it is something that if the people of Maryland voted for that, I would absolutely support it, and I think it would be a good measure of support. The other thing, though, I think we have to focus on and get done is also ensuring how we can both increase access to voting and also keep giving young people something to vote for.
Yes.
Right? Because it can't be one or the other. Because right now, truthfully, if you look at the primary numbers that came out of the primary election, the voting total for students between young people between the ages of 18 and 25 was 13%. These are people who have the right to vote. 13%. We have to be able to focus on increasing access to the ballot. We have to continue making sure that we are supporting things like mail-in voting, early voting, increasing the access for people to be able to make their voices heard, which the state of Maryland is actually moving aggressively on. And I'm really glad that the courts, ruled now that we can count these ballots early to make sure that people see the transparency inside the system. And at the same time, we have got to give people something to believe in. Because if we don't do that, we can open up the access all we want. And so that's why you see in our administration, we are going to be pushing for things like providing a service year option for every single high school graduate, knowing that every high school graduate should have a chance to have a paid year of service to the state of Maryland, to make them both connected to the state, but also connected to each other. And also that we are going to do things like supporting, and we will be reintroducing and bringing back the Governor's Office for Children, which used to exist in the state of Maryland. The current administration decided that it was not important. In the Moore Miller administration, it is important, and we will reinstate it and make sure that children and young people's voices are heard all throughout our administration.
There we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good evening. Joshua here with the Baltimore City NAACP. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Answering these vital, critical questions as people go to the polls this November. We celebrate Juneteenth, which is a reflection that policy and implementation are two different things, right? And so in Maryland, we passed the blueprint for Maryland's future. So my question is twofold. Number one, do you support the blueprint for Maryland's future? And then two, how will your administration, should you be elected, work to implement the blueprint for Maryland's future and ensure appropriate adequate funding to ensure that our children have their constitutionally mandated right to a quality public education here in Maryland?
Bless you, Joshua. Thank you. So not only do I support the blueprint for Maryland's future, I help work on it. This is something that I was very proud to work with countless legislators in the Maryland General Assembly when it comes to everything about how are we adding equity into the blueprint, how are we adding measurements and accountability. I was proud to work on the blueprint. I was proud when the legislature got it done and got it passed. I was proud that despite the fact that this administration decided that they wanted to veto it, that it was this General Assembly that decided to get a veto override and put our children first. And I'm proud of them for that. And my guarantee to them and my guarantee to everyone else we worked on with together to get the blueprint done, in our administration, I will fully fund it, and in partnership, we will properly implement it. And when I say properly implemented, it means every aspect of it. It means ensuring that we are going to start early, and that includes things like having free pre-K for every child in need in the state of Maryland. That pre-K should not be something for those who can afford it. That we are going to increase the pipeline for educators of color inside of the classroom, that we have now crossed a benchmark where the majority of children inside of Maryland's classrooms are children of color. We need to make sure that the educators in the front of the class help to reflect that reality. And that's not just for children of color, that is for all children, that they can see people who represent the diversity of Maryland in front of them. That we have to increase pay and supports for our educators. When you're looking at the atrophy and the revolving door that we're seeing, we're close to a half of educators leaving after their second year. We've got to prioritize both the retention and the recruitment of our educators, working with our HBCUs and our other institutions to create a better pipeline. And yes, also then focusing on that it's not just about a job, it's about a career pathway for our educators. And all of that needs to be filled with the fifth pillar, which is a measurement of accountability. that we need to make sure that it's fully funded, and at the same time, that there is full accountability for not just how the dollars are being spent, but how it is being operationalized from the government, from the educators, from everybody involved. And that is how we're going to create a proper pathway for our children to not just get a 21st century education, but to be able to participate in the 21st century economy, which is the point of all of this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, I think that was the last question for you, but you get closing remarks.
Well, first, and thank you all, and thank you for this opportunity to be able to address you. And, I think the only thing that I would close with is this. I was just having a conversation with somebody, and they talking about the historic nature of this race. They reminded me about the fact that this would be not only for my running mate, it'd be the first time in the state's history that we would have an immigrant who would be elected statewide in the history of the United States, a delegate or running mate. And for myself, this would be the first time in the history of the state of Maryland that we would have an African-American governor in the history of this state. And by the way, this would only be the third time in the country's history that we would have a black governor. Third time in this country's history. But I just want to be very clear on something. I am not running to make history. I'm running because in this moment, we are going to make child poverty history. That in this moment, we're going to make the racial wealth gap history.
Yes.
That in this moment, we're going to make environmental injustice history. That we are going to make educational and economic inequities history. This is a moment where we have a chance to be bold.
Yes.
And this is a moment that we have a chance to build a society and build a system that our ancestors hope for and that our children deserve. This is a moment that we have a chance to get this done. So I appreciate the time to be here today. My name is Westmore, and I humbly ask you for your vote. I humbly ask you for your support. I humbly ask you to go get your neighbors and go get your family out to come vote as well, because come November 9, we have a chance to do something that generations from now will talk about. This is our moment. So God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right. Now we will have our second candidate, Candidate David Harding.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dave Harding, and I am the Maryland Working Class Party candidate for governor. Kathy White is my running mate for lieutenant governor. Working Class Party doesn't exist yet. It remains to be built. But even if Kathy and I were elected, we still would not be able to change very much of anything by ourselves. This is because to really change things for the better, it will require a big fight by working people. I saw this when I first arrived in Maryland in the 1960s. Things only changed when people mobilized. These mobilizations forced the bosses and politicians to make some beneficial changes. Both Medicare and Medicaid, for example, came about because of these struggles. But one thing we lacked was a party to spread and direct the fights that occurred in order to push for much bigger changes. As a result, some of the changes that did occur began to be eroded after the movement subsided. And these gains are still being eroded today. I am sure that real fights will happen again. When and where these fights will start, I do not know. But we need to prepare now so that when this happens, we can take these fights as far as possible to actually get rid of this capitalist system that allows a small, wealthy minority at the top to get and control most of the wealth we produce. They only use it for their own benefit.
Hi, Tiffany Majors, Greater Baltimore Urban League. Thank you for attending this evening. The COVID-19 pandemic has challenged Maryland residents physically, emotionally, and financially, significantly in the Black and brown communities. As governor, one of you will be our state's financial steward. We know that the pandemic has increased the state's coffers. As governor, how will you ensure that those funds are efficiently used to ensure Maryland remains financially solvent, while also protecting our most vulnerable communities and appropriately distributing resources? Please be as specific as possible.
The problem is that this economy is organized to push more and more money into the pockets of corporate America and its bankers and other wealthy people who own it. The economy is not organized to provide what most of us need: affordable housing, affordable, reliable transportation, food, and gas prices that don't completely drain our paychecks. The politicians of both parties give tax breaks and all kinds of subsidies that benefit those at the top, while they claim that there is no money for repairing the roads, sewers, water systems, bridges, ports, and so forth. To the extent that the majority, the working people, have money to spend, that's what helps small businesses prosper.
You have 10 seconds to answer the question. Is that your answer?
Yes, that's my answer.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding, thank you again for joining us at Lashar with Black Votes. So Maryland's most recent and the books here. Much better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Natasha Murphy, Black Girls Vote, thank you again for joining us. Maryland's most recent annual statewide equal employment opportunity report, it notes a persistent pay disparity within state government across both racial and gender lines, revealing significant salary gaps between men and women of the same race. It actually increased from 2016 to 2021 for whites and African Americans. What actionable steps will your administration take to improve equity and address the existing pay disparity in state government?
Ordinary people's right to vote is under attack. Black people, disabled people, older people, even legal immigrants are particularly under attack for the right to vote. The whole electoral process is organized in such a way that it diminishes the weight of the votes of working people. And most workers don't have the day off to vote. It is an undemocratic system because winning can depend on millions and millions of dollars from donors. This kind of voting system certainly discourages civic engagement and contributes to various forms of discrimination.
So Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott has endorsed lowering the voting in 4 Maryland members of Congress in 2019, including Congressman Cummings, also have voted in support of lowering the voting age to 16 nationwide. Do you support lowering the voting age to 16?
Yes.
Short and sweet.
Good evening, Joshua Harris with the Baltimore NAACP. Maryland's Minority Business Enterprise Program is the oldest in the nation, serving as an example for numerous other states. What would your administration's diversity purchasing commitment be? How will you ensure that truly minority-owned business enterprises have full and fair opportunities to participate in doing business with the state of Maryland?
By barring discrimination and enforcing those rules and regulations.
How you doing? How you doing? I'm Nicole Hansen of Out for Justice. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We work to change criminal justice laws and policies that impact individuals coming out of our prisons and jail. My question for you, if you were elected, would you increase the budget that ensures that the state of Maryland operates a women's pre-release facility?
Yes. Let me say a few things about the whole question of public safety and criminal justice.
Microphone.
Maryland needs to stop putting innocent people in jail.
Yes.
Unemployment, inflation, the closing of many rec centers, low pay, have all created social conditions that contribute to crime. One offshoot is an enormous illegal drug industry, adding to incarceration rates and violent deaths. Crime will decrease when social conditions are improved. We talk about the crimes of a lot of young people who have been pushed to the edge of society, but we often ignore the criminality at the top of the society. Not just a few wealthy people, not just a few politicians, but the criminality of allowing corporations to dictate who has a job, who has decent pay and benefits, decent pay and benefits, what air, water, and land is ruined by their decisions.
And while I agree with everything that you said, I'll use my 30-second follow-up. You answered half of the question, I agree. The last half of the question is, if you are elected, would you fund a women's pre-release? Would you ensure that under your administration, the state of Maryland would fund a women's pre-release facility?
I don't believe that anybody who has the right to be out of jail should be in it.
Closing remarks.
Excuse me?
You get closing remarks now. That's all the questions we have.
Okay. If working people weren't charged politically, we would have much different policies from what we see. We would organize things differently. We would be more transparent than what we see. Like problems in the water and sewer departments or with environmental certificates that don't get updated. But I want to say that we are trying to build a working class party because nothing is going to change until working people take an active part, until we organize, we make our demands, and we fight for what we need.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harden, and we will.
Hey, Josh.
I was gonna say we're gonna have our next candidate now, so thank you for joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have our next candidate is candidate David Lashar.
I'm on the firing line, right? Hello, everybody.
You get an opening statement.
First of all, at this time of year as a candidate, you're talking a lot, so I apologize for the frog in my voice. I am David Lashar. I'm your Libertarian candidate for Maryland governor. And the reason that I am running is because I believe that our American experiment in democracy is in dire jeopardy. And the reason for this jeopardy is not what the two big parties are telling us. The reason is the two big parties themselves. They are engaged in a holy war with one another. They are bringing us divisive politics. They are bringing us dysfunctional policy, and we need other options. So that's why I stepped forward with my running mate, Christiana Logan Smith. And we are standing as your principled, accomplished, and civil options to be Maryland's next governor. Professionally, I'm an IT executive. I have experience in both public sector, federal level and state level of government and throughout the commercial sector. I live in Annapolis with my wife and daughter. My wife has spent her career in environmental protection and natural resources. And I'll close with this thought, which is that if you do elect me governor, then what I wish my legacy to be is that people say that I helped to spark a true renaissance of Baltimore like we saw 100 years ago in Harlem. That is my goal. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Lashar. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Natasha Murphy with Black Girls Vote. My question for you is, the persistent pay disparities within state government are well documented. From 2016 to 2021, the pay disparity between white and African American state employees actually increased. And so what actionable steps will your administration take to improve equity and address the existing pay disparity within Maryland state government?
So this is an area of some direct experience. As you might know, I served in the Hogan administration before I left the Republican Party. And I served in the largest agency in our state government, the Department of Health. And I served there running operations and IT. I was the number 2 person in 2017. And through that experience, what I know is that whether it is procurement or pay, there is a great focus on what we can summarize as equity and fairness. Okay? There are offices devoted to these goals of ours, these shared goals of ours. And what we need to be careful about, because I have seen the data, what we need to be careful about is we need to recognize the efforts that are already underway in these agencies to fulfill their missions. And we have to recognize that some of the data what it seems to indicate in severity, the severity of the problems aren't as great as some of the data says when you dig down 2 and 3 levels deep and see how long have people been in these jobs and what are some of the other reasons that drive these differences. So I support the goal. I will continue to support the goal. I just would want to be a governor who drills down beyond the first blush of the data.
Great. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Sam Yogi from Baltimore Votes. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott endorsed lowering the voting age to 16 for Baltimore City elections in his last campaign, and 16 and 17-year-olds already serve as election workers all across Maryland and here in Baltimore City. Many of them are stepping up to help fill our poll worker shortage this year. Do you support lowering the voting age to 16?
Now, when we talk about voting rights or any type of rights, what we have to do is talk about our responsibilities as well. There are no rights that do not come with responsibilities. And for the serious responsibility of voting, I do not think that 16-year-olds are ready. Our current voting age of 18 is due to the effects of the Vietnam War, right? If you were going to serve in the military, if you're going to be sent overseas, then you had to be given the franchise. My daughter is 15. I don't want her voting next year. Right? So no, I think that is going at least one bridge too far, 16-year-olds voting. That said, I love the idea of recruiting 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds to support the electoral process in the ways that you were just describing, Sam. So enlisting and drawing upon our youth, yes. Lowering the voting age from where it is, no.
Thank you. Lashar, Joshua Harris with the Baltimore NAACP. My question is about Maryland's Minority Business Enterprise Program, which is one of the oldest in the nation, started as an example for numerous states. What would be your administration's approach to diversity purchasing commitment? How will you ensure that a truly minority-owned business enterprises have full and fair opportunities to participate in doing business with the state of Maryland?
I think, I'm going to repeat what I said in the earlier question. I've seen what goes on in procurements, right? I know the RFPs go out with their proper targets. I know that these agencies, our state agencies, are committed to achieving these numbers. But that doesn't mean that we don't have anything to do. Okay? So what do we need to do? It's less about the targets that we set at this point, the low numbers that we're actually seeing. It's more that we're not encouraging enough businesses to be there and take advantage of the opportunities that are available. That's the real problem. So what do I want to do? One, more businesses that are eligible need to know about these opportunities. That's marketing and education. We will do that. But two, we need to select industries where we incubate, we grow, we nurture more small businesses to be able to participate and win these procurements. I want to say one more thing about small businesses or businesses across Maryland, but in Baltimore and the Black community in particular. Anybody who has tried to start a business knows that it's not just about your idea and your money. It is all the regulations and permits that you need from the authorities at city, state, and federal level to be allowed to open your doors. Those aren't going to go away anytime soon. We need a concierge service to help people navigate through that process, and I would commit to bringing that about.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Nicole Hanson Mundell, Executive Director of Out for Justice, a grassroots board that is led by formerly and currently incarcerated people. And our mission is to change laws and policies in the state of Maryland, in addition to some other direct service support that we offer. I heard you talk about your expertise in the tech industry. I also heard you talk about your maybe at least 4 years of experience with the Hogan administration behind the scenes doing operations. So tell me, if you were elected, how would you ensure that formerly incarcerated individuals who want to get employment in state government
can do that? And two, what would you do how would you support businesses who are owned by individuals with a criminal record? How would you ensure that they too have access to support funding from GOCAP and the likes?
As a point of fact, it was 30 months in the Hogan administration.
30 months is a long time to navigate operations.
Yep. So we have too many individuals incarcerated, and far too high a proportion of those who have been incarcerated in Maryland and other states come from the Black community. All right, I might get a question about this later, but the number one thing that we can do to start reverse that is ending the war on drugs. Okay, ending the war on drugs has had a massively disproportionate and unconscionable impact on the Black community. It has been going on for 70 years. It has failed, and it needs to come to an end. That will help stop the incarceration problem, right? But for people coming out of serving the time they've been asked to serve, we need to promote the programs that you're talking about. Maybe not directly into IT, to be honest about it. My running mate, Christiana, she runs a cleaning business, Service Master. She recruits, hires, and uses formerly incarcerated individuals, goes out of her way to do so. Does it always work out? No, it doesn't. Goes out of her way to do that. We need to bring about more of that. Christiana and I would encourage that, but I can't stand here and tell you right now that I have a specific program to do so, a commitment.
Just so you know, my question wasn't about a program, my 30 seconds, my question was, how will you ensure, if you were governor, how would you ensure that individuals with criminal records get access to IT jobs in state government?
In truth, I can't stand here and tell you that I could guarantee access of anyone to any particular type of job. IT requires a specific skill set.
We know this. Individuals with criminal records have a lot of skill sets. We have IT skill sets, we have entrepreneurial skill sets. Some of us are doctors, lawyers, nurses. We have a broad variety. I'm asking for those individuals who do have those skill sets, what would it look like for your office to ensure employment access? Whoever you're mentioned, overseas jobs, things like that. So what would your office do to ensure that those people with those skill sets have access to employment under your administration?
Well, if people are readying to leave incarceration to go back into the community, there is a whole set of, a whole program of services that they go through, right? To get ready to return to the community with lower rates of recidivism. So what do we need to do there? Make sure that these types of opportunities are brought to the attention of people as they are getting ready to return to the community.
Hi, Tiffany Majors, Greater Baltimore Urban League. I have a few questions in regards to Maryland blueprint for the future. Are you aware of?
The current information, yes.
Okay. I'd like to, ask a question in regards to your IT background. As you said that you have experience in the IT background, and that those who have been impacted by the justice system is not appropriate for IT, the IT profession. At Greater Baltimore Urban League, we just provided 46 certifications from March through August, 11 of which high cybersecurity certifications in Security Plus, certified ethical hacker, and certified network defender. 11 of those individuals have a criminal background, and they will be employed, and 3 of them are now employed by Baltimore. My second question is, with your background in regards to IT, surely you are familiar with the high disparities in IT for Black and brown communities. During the pandemic, there were hundreds of thousands of Black and brown students who were unable to access their lawful right to go to school due to IT insecurities, disparities. What would you do to ensure that Black and brown students receive equal access as well as funding and stipend to receive high quality internet access, as well as, I guess you just said that individuals returning from prison can't get IT jobs. So pretty much would like to know what your responsibility and what you will do to ensure that Black and brown students have access to IT.
Yeah, and I apologize for giving the impression that I was saying there's only one type of job or another that anybody emerging from prison would be eligible for. I was just trying to say that not everybody is qualified to be an IT professional. You need to line up people and their skills and what they want to do with opportunities. I apologize for conveying otherwise. For the IT, it's again letting people know what positions are available. It's and from the state enterprise, as it's called, it's recruiting, reaching out and recruiting, taking a risk on individuals who are coming out of the prison system and giving them opportunity. That requires nothing more than commitment, management, follow through. I don't think it's that difficult. I ran the IT at Department of Health. We always had a deficit of talent. We're always looking for people. And within the state enterprise, there is more of a willingness to take risk on individuals who might not have the ideal skill set or skill profile than you would find in private business. So I want to congratulate you on what I heard from your program and its success. And I would try to mimic that and expand it if I were elected governor.
You have 10 seconds to answer the question. Is that your answer?
It was intended to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have closing remarks now.
So again, my ambition as governor would be to spark a Baltimore Renaissance. It's not something I can do myself, so how would I do it? Besides ending the war on drugs, which I wasn't asked about, but I think is the #1 policy that can be adopted to reduce crime, restore progress and hope in our city, and reduce incarceration. Besides that, what do we need to do? We need to fix the schools. And it's not the Kerwin Commission recommendations that are going to do that. Pouring $4 billion more per year into the already broken school system is not what we need. In K through 12, what we need is what we've already got at the collegiate and university level. A mix of public and private. Choice for students, choice for teachers. That's the only way to bring about accountability and excellence in education. Thank you.
All right, our final candidate is Nancy Wallace.
Good evening, Nancy. You can begin with opening remarks.
Thank you. I didn't know you were going to be up here, Josh, asking me questions when we talked earlier. Cool. You said next screen. So, good evening. Thank you for the invitation and the huge organizing work for this major event. to Rachel and to the museum, to all the sponsors, and to public attendees. I'm Nancy Wallace, representing the Greens of Maryland. I grew up and live in Bethesda, and I'm 66 years old. Yes. I have a degree in political science from Yale University with a minor in developing country revolutionary movements, learning how nations evolve politically after becoming independent of the colonial empires, not unlike some of our trajectory in Maryland and Baltimore. I became a representative of the National Environmental Movement on Capitol Hill as a registered lobbyist for 14 years. I've worked directly on national legislation, authorization, appropriations, the federal budget, conference reconciliation, and built 2 national grassroots networks to bring about our funding and legislative goals. In my last position there, I represented the Sierra Club for 5 years and won $500 million for women's reproductive health care in developing countries. Since then, I've worked for 30 years on the executive side of the federal government, doing information technology and program improvement for the Pentagon, Treasury, Homeland Security, and Commerce departments as a contractor. I've been co-chair of the Montgomery County Greens for 8 years. My full bio's on the website, wallaceforgovernor.us, because I'm all about us. Reforming Maryland and Baltimore is a team sport. In my private life, relevant to tonight, I've mentored 3 children of one disadvantaged Black family in downtown DC for 25 years. Those children took me on a journey into the heart and underside of America that I find repeated in Baltimore with different names but the same struggles. The systemic racism and systemic sexism that has been part of the foundation of this country has left us a system that cannot meet the needs of today nor tomorrow. We need a transformational, deep realignment of social, legal, and economic structures with our values as our guiding light. Not habit, nor power, nor tradition. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here tonight. I'm Sam Middleby from Baltimore Votes. 5 Maryland cities have already lowered the voting age to 16 for city elections. 16 and 17-year-olds already serve as election workers all across Maryland. And here in Baltimore City school students are working as poll workers or being recruited as poll workers to address the poll worker shortages that made voting harder in the city during the primary. Mayor Brandon Scott has endorsed lowering the voting age to 16 for Baltimore City elections. Do you support lowering the voting age to 16?
I do support lowering the age of voting to 16. Furthermore, in terms of voting rights, I support restoring full voting rights to everyone who's a citizen, regardless of whether one is incarcerated or not. It's horrendous. You're a human being. You're in this country. You need to vote. In fact, it's the people for whom the system hasn't worked that we need to hear from most at the ballot box. Additionally, I've been working for many years on voting integrity. I brought my information technology expertise to a national nonpartisan group called verifiedvoting.org, and I served for many years on their advisory committee. And that was the group that helped, and I helped co-found True Vote Maryland in 2002, which got rid eventually of that voting system brought in by the Linda Lamone of the Board of Elections that had no paper trail, no way for the voter original intent to be recorded, verified, or recounted. So I devoted 5 years of my life to that grassroots fight. I'm a very strong advocate, and I am actually preparing a flyer that I will be distributing here in Baltimore that will tell people the exact legal language of when ex-felons can get their voting rights back, how, and give them QR codes on how they can access the online registration to re-register and vote this election. Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Wallace, Director of Baltimore NAACP. My question is about policy versus implementation. We know that there are 2 separate things, and we passed the blueprint for Maryland's future here in the state of Maryland. If elected governor, how, one, would you continue to support the blueprint for Maryland's future? But then 2, how would you plan to oversee effective implementation and continued funding of the blueprint for Maryland's future to ensure our children get their constitutionally mandated right to a quality public education?
Yes, I support full funding. I looked at that, and I think that have gone through the Montgomery County budget in detail as part of my Green Party local advocacy work there. And if you go carefully through the budgets, you can always find excess. There are travel budgets. There's, for instance, in the Maryland state budget, there's an extra new helicopter out in Western Maryland, and I'm just not sure we couldn't make the current helicopter last another year or two. There are ways to find that money, and one of the great joys of becoming governor of Maryland is that we have this unique constitutional system where the governor sets the budget. So when I say I will fully fund the blueprint for the future, I will fully fund that blueprint for the future. I'm also very interested in transitioning to Montessori for the early years, for pre-K through to second grade. This surveys and all the academic research shows that Montessori produces students who are eager to learn. It has both an emotional healing as well as academic curiosity, and I think we should have the very best pedagogical techniques used in Maryland. So I'd like to support that. Green Party and I also support free college. No ifs, ands, or buts. If Germany can do it, we can do it. That we can just do that. And we don't need to go through all this complicated paperwork and forgiveness of loans and here and there and then get challenged in the courts. No, K through 12 should continue on through the college years. Give kids a future.
How you doing, Ms. Nancy?
I'm good, thank you.
Surely I'm very curious with your budget knowledge. I love that you're so knowledgeable about the budget. And I want to encourage you as the executive director of Out for Justice, being one of the awards who led on voting rights for individuals behind the walls and individuals who are currently released right now. I encourage you that before you make those flyers, come holler at us first.
All right.
Because we're down there work, and we could use some additional support. My question is directly from one of my members, as I have a few of my members in the audience. I go nowhere without my members. The question is, and it gives a little bit of context. Does your agenda as governor include the growing population of justice-impacted returning citizens? If that is yes, how do you plan to reduce the harm effects of criminal background checks post-incarceration? So how do you plan to reduce the harmful effects of criminal background checks post-incarceration? And the last part of that question is, what is your message to the not in my backyard folks who think justice-impacted returning citizens should be restricted to low-income areas?
Well, considering that a lot of the market for illegal marijuana and harder drugs is among the white and upper population, I think that's just pure racism. Has nothing to do with not in my backyard per se. But the major, absolutely huge problem we have of returning people to the community, first of all, I would address this with the ban the box legislation, putting that forward. We can certainly implement it immediately as governor, where what that means is we would no longer have a box on the initial job applications to indicate whether there was a criminal record. Just ban the box, no problem. That information came up further down in the interview process. However, certainly for the state government, it would not be dispositive, and we would actually be doing the opposite. I'm really excited about replicating a New York City program where not only is New York City, and on my literature, I promise to do mass pardon for all cannabis-related convictions, but it will give preference in small business loans to anyone with a marijuana conviction that wants to start a dispensary. We're going to make that into from lemons into lemonade. Our community should be benefiting, and in fact, the vacant property here in Baltimore we should be growing our own marijuana here with organic techniques as small businesses, and then we can control also the intensity of it, so we don't get these unknown drugs that we've got coming up across the border. So ban the box, and I also think I've seen information that mentoring people coming out is very important, and having access to loans. Also, I'd like to put this in the context of my education recommendation of academies and high schools for paying internships. So people in the first place, if they're caught doing something, they will still have skills when they come out. And again, we'll have free college. Oops, sorry.
Hi, Tiffany Majors, Greater Baltimore Urban League. The COVID-19 pandemic has challenged Maryland residents physically, emotionally, and financially, specifically with high disparities in the Black and brown communities. As governor, one of you will be our state's financial steward. We know that the pandemic has increased the state's coffers. As governor, how will you ensure that those funds are efficiently used to ensure Maryland residents financially solvent, while also protecting the most vulnerable communities and appropriately distributing resources? Specifically speak about grassroots nonprofit organizations as well, and be as specific as possible.
I and the Green Party support and have always supported universal free health care. We have that in Western Europe. There's no reason why, if we're supposedly the richest country in the world, we can't take care of our people. That's kind of the whole point. So not only would we be funding local health organizations, because localization and decentralization of power is a critical factor, not just in healthy communities, but in breaking up the overconcentration of power that we have today in America and in Maryland. The wealth of the 1% needs to be redistributed down to the working class and the poor and the disadvantaged that generated that wealth in the first place. So that's a partial answer on that aspect. In terms of the fact that the state has ended up with a huge budget surplus while we have people who are losing their homes because they can't pay medical bills. All of this is just this rat race connected with private health insurance. I hate to say it, but this is from the Democratic administration. All it did was force us into another commercial market with a little bit of extra money here and there to make us think that we aren't hurting poor people. What we need is really health, and that's the main thing. And I am a big advocate of pure health from the beginning. I promise reverse osmosis water filters free starting on day one, and it's on my website in writing. I'm not just saying it tonight. Because for all households with nursing babies or babies on infant formula, we need to start the next generation without lead, mercury, arsenic, PFAS, forever chemicals, all of it. And I also want to restrict the agricultural extension service of the state to farmers who are willing to transition to organic. So we get rid of the toxics. And if you want to stay toxic, you kind of can, but you're going to bear the full cost. And we need to have, if we have clean, truly clean water, truly clean food, and then shutting down the incinerators, truly clean air, that's the start to health with vitamin D. And there's no substitute for health. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ms. Wallace, and thank you again for joining us. I'm Natasha Murphy with Black Girls Vote. And so the persistent pay disparity within Maryland state government is well documented. You know, the latest report indicates that the disparity has actually grown amongst white and African-American men and women within state government. And so your administration, what actionable steps would you take to improve equity and address the existing pay disparity within Maryland state government?
Well, if we have those studies, then we have the numbers we need to fix it. So we would have to do a full-scale reevaluation of each department and each office and adjust the pay scales, period. We have zero tolerance for this type of discrimination, particularly in the state government. I myself know that I am paid less, even in my information technology work, probably than the other guys I work with, but at this point, I just like to focus on politics, so I don't worry about it too much. But I'm very, obviously as a woman, I'm aware I've not been allowed to even take jobs when I was grown up. When I was young and growing up, we weren't even allowed to be crossing guards in school. And I was not allowed to wear pants to school till 8th grade, no matter how cold it was. So if it was 10 degrees out, public school, we all had to wear dresses. So the discrimination against women in the employment field is certainly the state government's just kind of done to be taken care of. Hopefully they'll initiate that in the first month. And all power to Black girls. Yeah. And I'd like to just say, oh good, I've got 15 seconds. I kind of think in terms of the voting and girls and 16-year-old, that I almost wonder if 18 should be an upper limit for voting instead of a lower limit, because we need the clarity and wisdom and values of young people to realign our society, because we've gotten really off track and we need a big transformation to bring us back to a values-oriented society. Thank you.
Ms. Wallace, you get closing remarks now. Thank you.
There are a few other issues I'd just like to clarify. One is the main issue for me is climate change. And I see the emergency World War II type mobilization that we need to do on climate change as the big shoehorn in which to turn over and remold and rebuild and re-beautify all of our structures and all of our communities. Paris is planting 170,000 trees to cool Paris. You know what? We can take that surplus and we can plant 170,000 trees here in Baltimore. We can do urban farming. There's no need to buy expensive vegetables from California. We can do it right here in Baltimore. Chicago is taking old brick factory buildings and making greenhouses out of them. We can rebuild our economies with local, just, sustainable, healthy economies here, and we can be the laboratory for the new America and the new Maryland. So I would thank you very much for considering voting for me, Nancy Wallace for Governor, .us. Thank you.
All right. Well, we've heard all four of our candidates. You all have gotten a lot of information. I can't tell you what to do. I must say, though, I am happy that Ms. Wallace raised the issue of incarcerated individuals around the issue of marijuana.
Yes.
If we get to vote to legalize marijuana, and we legalize marijuana, how do we justify having people behind jail, behind bars, on marijuana charges, nonviolent marijuana charges? So I'm happy that issue came up. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. You know, this is just the first part of the process. Whoever wins as governor, our next step is to make sure that they are held accountable for all of the promises made prior to getting into office.
Yes.
So our job is just beginning. And then we just have to keep pushing the pedal to the metal and making sure that they do what they said they were going to do, because ultimately they work for us.
Yes.
We are not working for them. And to some degree, I think some folks have forgotten that they work for us. And we have the ability to vote people out of office if they're not doing what they need to do. So, I can't tell you what to do, but remember, we are the ones who are in charge, not the other way around. Let me thank our partners, and I'm gonna go from this side all the way down to that side. Tiffany Majors with Greater Baltimore Urban League. Natasha Murphy with Libertarian Votes. His bad sister Nicole Hanson, my dad. Joshua Harris with the Baltimore City and Sam Novy from Baltimore Votes. We look forward to partnering with you all again in the future, and thank you all for attending.
Oh,